Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to another NMRAx. Unfortunately, I must apologise. I think some people thought we were actually going to be on air last week, but Brad and I ended up at a train show for something different. So unfortunately, we had to move it forward one week, or move it back 1 week. Anyway, we've got 3 hours of mirth and merriment here. Today we've got 3 clinics, which I think you're all going to enjoy. But first of all, the travel arrangements must be changing with NMRAx because we're heading all the way over to France at the moment. And our first clinician is an active model railroader in France for more than 25 years. He's had some neat projects in HO, standard, narrow gauge. He's dabbled in ON30, man after my own heart. But now he's turned to N scale with a Canadian switching layout. He joined the NMRA a year ago, so he's a new member. Welcome and thank you. And to challenge himself with the achievement program. So all the way over to France, and we welcome Benoit.
Thank you very much, Marty. And bonjour. Welcome, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. Okay, well, then let's start. So, I'm Benoit, and I need to give you a quick overview of who I am, because I think it's quite important to understand. So, first of all, English is not my native language, and so I might pronounce things in a very exotic way for you. And also, it's quite late here. I practice sport for 8 hours today, and my English kind of dropped when I'm tired. So I wrote my text, but sometimes I might goof. So I'm very sorry about that. If you don't understand something, we'll have a question time at the end of the presentation. So yeah, please ask in the chat of wherever you want to ask it. As you know, the quote, France is, so as you know, knowledge is power, and France is Bacon. Hence, you learn a lot of things. I hope this presentation will be an exploration of France through prototype trains and model trains. And I will also highlight the differences between Francophone Europe and modeling and North American modeling. I might also cover a little bit of United Kingdom, as we have a lot of common with them. First of all, you need to know where we are. So we'll start with one quick presentation of geography. We are in France, it's Western Europe. Our neighbors on the map are clockwise Great Britain at the north across the Channel, Belgium, which is a place that uses French language, like Luxembourg. You can find French speakers there. Germany in the east, Switzerland, that uses French as well, Italy, and bottom left, Spain. So you might not be familiar with my country, so I will use the map regularly to show you locations and places. Regarding the history, you cannot understand the modern railroading in a country without knowing a little bit about the real train's history. So to achieve that, I will use the history standard we use for models, which is the European norm 810F for France. It's a standard that is observed in the whole Europe for model trains. You will have it for each country. Manufacturers actually put that norm on their packaging, so it allows modelers to know if a given model suits their given time frame. It's something North America really lacks of. It was very difficult for me to start modeling without these eras. Please, NMRA, we need to do something. We need to make up. Anyway, I will use these eras for this presentation, and for each of them, I will cover the prototype and the models. So, the very beginnings. As you can imagine, France, like the rest of the world, was before trains. Traveling was very slow, by foot, by horse, by boat. So, like everywhere, France just finished a program to build canals, to convey anything by water. So the first railroad actually connected mines to river ports. The first trains in France were used to move coal in the center of France. From Saint-Étienne to Andrézieux, it was founded in 1827. It's the southernmost point on the map. So it was rapidly expanded to Lyon, which is a major city. We usually start the history in 1822 as they used the first locomotive at the time. Before that, they used horses. The second line was for Paris leisure between Paris and Saint-Germain, so very close to Paris. It was appointed by the King Philip in 1837, and it's the northeastern point on the map. The line is actually still in service as part of Paris' suburban network. But the global development of railways really started under Napoleon III, which was the emperor, in 1850 roughly. And it's when we find the first interesting document regarding modern railroading. This engraving shows a model of a train. That train was built for the imperial trains in the garden of the imperial palace. So that image, published in 1859, is considered as one of the oldest representations of the railway. Then we started expanding the network. At the beginning, the railroad was very short. A lot of them were only last 1 year or 2 years before being bought back to the railroad or another company. But some of them saw the opportunity to carrying goods and passengers, so they started to expand. And then every city and village wanted to have a station. So the government decided to act in two things. First, in 1842, they decided that the network originates from Paris, which is visible on the map on the left. And secondly, in 1878, they decided that every major local city must be connected by rail. 30 years later, the results are quite visible on the map on the right, a huge network. At that time, it was very pioneering. So you can imagine every possible solution to have a train, like monorails. Why not? Come on, it's quite stupid, but yeah, it was a wild time. It could be presented in itself, so maybe later. For the big companies in 1919, they decided to ease interchanges. So they created the central office in order to share standard for the rolling stock. Car and coaches are unified. It's pretty much like what was done in the USA by the USRA. So it's the OCM that stands for, it's the central office for railway material design. And also another revolution is the fact that in 1922, it was possible to interchange cars as a standard procedure for the whole Europe. So it was possible to have that car pictured on the screen, sorry, that would go to Poland, for instance, or elsewhere. One short highlight is the time of World War II, where a 60-centimeter gauge Bonjour system was created in order to carry supplies, ammo, troops to the front. So for modelers, it's a new topic we kind of explore these days because we have more and more rolling stock and stuff being available, mostly in HO and 0. So it's that popular that Bachmann actually made some models. Yeah. So after World War I, which was probation time for a lot of the small lines, well, most of them were bankrupt, so they kind of disappear. And at the turn of the 1920s, the number of road vehicles was so important that a lot of small lines disappeared. That early part of era 1 is one of the less modeled, even if a trend appears recently. So the market is quite small, it requires to have a lot of scratch building. But in that era, with a lot of very small and varied lines, you can imagine a lot of things. So open your imagination, or you can just go deep in historical research. It works as well. On this layout, it's an HO layout, it's quite small. Actually used a reproduction of a 19th century as a background. And that wallpaper depicts trains. Quite smart. Here too, fast forward to the beginning of the 20th century and even later. We have 7 main companies in the country. They are mostly private and have been combined by an agreement with the government in 1883. So we're going to tour the 7 of them. First one, the North, obviously serves the North. North in France. So a lot of industrial traffic because they serve mines that are in the northeast. And yeah, you can identify them because the locomotives, the main locomotives actually are painted in a chocolate color. They're quite luxurious trains. And the locomotive I decided to illustrate the slide is preserved at the National Museum of Trains in Mulhouse. The Eastern Company, la Compagnie de l'Est, served the East. Oops, sorry, too far. So they also have a lot of industrial traffic and mostly huge industrial traffic. Their dark green locomotives are very well known. The eastern part of the element I highlighted in the map. (1918). So when they returned back to France, they were not given back to the Compagnie de l'Est, but they were formed as a public company. The passenger traffic was mostly between Luxembourg. Thank you. So back on tracks. So yeah, the locomotive I choose to illustrate is a preserved locomotive that come from the Compagnie de l'Est and then was used by the National Railways afterward. It's preserved in Switzerland. The third one is the big one, actually. You can think of the PLM as the NYC in the United States, for instance. It's the Paris-Lyon Mediterranean. So it connected 3 main cities of France, Paris, Lyon, and Marseille at the south. They're also connected to Switzerland, the famous Côte d'Azur, Nice, and then go to Italy. Their light green locomotives were quite famous in order to carry people from the capital to the Mediterranean Sea. They also serve the Massif Central, which are the mountains at the center of France, and the Alps. Then the PO for Paris Orleans, it's quite an interesting story because, well, they were very stubborn and they decided to only build stub end stations. So when they go from Paris to Orléans, they built a stub end station in Orléans. And then when they decided to go south to Tours, for instance, they built another stub end station. Also, when they realized it was not the solution, they went forward and they managed to reach Bordeaux on the southwest of France, from the Atlantic to the Massif Central. So they also have that line I pictured on the screen, which is blue, and it's quite interesting because it very, very long branch lines that crosses across 2 other companies. So their steam locomotives are gray, and they also ran quite expanded metric gauge network. The Compagnie du Midi, so it's the southern one, because Midi means it's another way to say south in French. They are mostly active on the Pyrenees, and they don't have access to Paris. They interchange with Spain, even if Spain has a larger gauge, so they just manage to do the stuff. It's mostly a mountainous railroad, so at the southern part, they decided to take the initiative mostly to electrify their lines very early. The rest of the traffic is mostly wine and greeneries and a lot of tourism, because one of the main train stations in France, in Lourdes, is dedicated to pilgrims. They decided to join forces with the PO in 1934. So they reached Paris then. Then the Compagnie de l'Ouest, West means west. So same way of saying it, different spelling. At the end of the 19th century, a lot of small companies struggled to serve Normandy and Brittany. So this decided to group under one company. They run passenger trains, a lot of leisure trains for Parisians going to Normandy and Brittany, including very well-known painters, the Impressionists. So the image I picked is quite iconic in France. It's an accident that happened in Paris, where a locomotive crashed on the pavement in 1895. The brake failed. Not in good shape. The Compagnie de l'Ouest was bought by the Compagnie de l'État in 1909. The Administration des chemins de fer de l'État, so it's the state-owned network. It was a group of small companies that were bankrupt, and the state decided to buy them and run them. So it was the pink part on the map with a lot of bankrupt companies again. So when they purchased the Compagnie de l'Ouest in 1909, it created a big company that managed to reach Paris. The PO kept that very profitable line going to Nantes, the small line in blue. So it's quite interesting regarding interchanges. And we have a lot of metric system lines because the great companies were just the backbone of transport in the country. So the local network was built in the cheapest way using the 1 meter gauge. So you can think of this network as the American 3-foot lines. Some companies were very grandiose with a lot of stuff and big assets like the main companies, but for a lot of them, it was just enough revenue to pay for the fuel. So you could find them literally everywhere. And we have 2 surviving type of lines. The first one I choose to illustrate are the touristic ones. You will still find some rail cars or steam engines, but you also have a few lines, metro lines, in active revenue service nowadays. Mostly located at 5 locations, so I highlighted them on the map. And the very end of the era number 2 is the creation of the national railways. So after doing a lot of work on unifying the network and simplifying interchanges, in 1938, the state decided to nationalize everything. It was quite standard in Europe. And actually, France was one of the latest to nationalize the railways. So it was the end of the great companies, but the beginning of a new era. Regarding model railways, the time after World War I was the era of tin plates, but we had a few specialized artisans that created very, very realistic models. I was not able to find a good picture of one of them, so I picked a tin plate, but yeah, find online from Maresco, Gaume, or Lequen. Also, Fournereau, who was one of these artisans, created the first model railway magazine in 1937, Locomotive, but more on that later. So, era number 2 gains nowadays in popularity as some manufacturers are building models of the ancient companies. Then, era number 3, I would say it's the most popular one, with not a surprise because it's the equivalent of the transition era in North America. Post World War II, you will find a lot of different stock on the lines. For instance, that American locomotive, it's a Baldwin like Mikado. I had the pleasure to drive it. I really love it. We have so Canadian locomotive, German locomotive, steam locomotive, and the last French-made locomotives, which were very unique prototypes in order to continue use the steam not working. So we also have a lot of unified rail cars that are progressively taking over the passenger traffic on a lot of lines. Along the diesel taking over steam, the transition was mainly made through the continuation of electrification. So a significant number of lines were converted before the war, and they were using 1.5 kilovolts direct current ingrained on the map. But The new norm decided by the French state was set in 1950 approximately, and it was to use 25 kilovolt alternative current in red. So the East and the North were the first one to benefit from these programs, and we'll still use it. And actually the high-speed lines we have in France are using it. Regarding the old system, it was the one that was used to set world speed record in 1955 of 331 kilometers, which is, I think, more than 2 miles per hour, 200 miles per hour. Regarding models, we have the foundation, the establishment of JWEF, which will be the national the national manufacturer. So they're funded in 1944 and they specialize in HO scale. So it's the most prolific brand in France. They offer affordable but approximate models. And they do that for decades. So for most modelers, it was the beginning of their journey in model railroading. They started to produce more serious models at the beginning of 1980s, but yeah, it was a little bit too late. Another aspect of models is that in 1954 is created a union of model railroaders for the whole Europe. It's the NMRAx. I will say more about it later. During era 3, the rolling stock gets new markings in the 1960s, and it's a no-go for operators. You know, in North America, operations are very successful, and I think it's because you have 1 feet high markings. Our markings are just 1 inch high markings. And on the picture I shared between an HO model and an N-scale model, it's still it's way easier to read what's written on the blurry gondola at the back. We're not lucky. Anyway, in the 1960s, it's also the beginning of the decline of 2-axle cars. Yes, having 2 trucks becomes the new norm. It's quite late compared to the USA, but yeah, you can still find a few of 2-axle cars in active revenue in the 21st century. All passenger cars have switched to 2 trucks in the 1970s, and all new passenger cars built starting after the 70s are unified across Europe. It's a standard, and you can find similar things across all countries. Era number 4 is the one about innovations and records. The railways are in crisis because of a competition of free highways, and the local lines are all now gone. So it's the time for the national railways to renew. First of all, they ran the last steam locomotive. So it was in 1972 for passenger services, but the last one for freight trains was in 1975, and the locomotive I picture is the last one that ran that last train on September 24th of 1975. And then the future is probably using diesel, huge locomotive, turbo trains, and so on, were the future until the 1970s energy crisis hit. So one of the best examples of that time is the RTG unit. I pictured it. Some of you might find it, yeah, with a deja vu feeling. It's normal because Amtrak bought a few of them. And regarding diesel, actually, the first TGV prototype was diesel powered. Yep. In 1975, the National Railways decided to make the next generation of passenger coaches. So these are the Corail, and Corail stands for Comfort on Rails. Simple as that. So it was the standard for long distance travel. The trains ran between, well, 160 kilometers per hour, even 200 kilometers per hour. 200 kilometers per hour is quite common, actually. So 4,000 cars were built, including pilot cars, luggage cars, bars, restaurants, and even a few disco cars. Quite cool. So they changed how the travel was done because the standards were higher than the previous ones. The first livery of these Corail cars are quite rare nowadays, but I like them. And of course, of the big era of the TGV. So TGV is train grande vitesse in high-speed train, simple as that. The first prototype is built in 1978, which is just 3 years after the last steam locomotive. And during the test, they ran at more than 300 kilometers per hour. Quite crazy for the time. So the first commercial line opens in 1981 between Paris and Lyon, and it's the official first high-speed records set for a high-speed lane in France with 380 kilometers per hour. In the meantime, while you have a high race regarding passenger traffic, freight is not a priority. Trucking was better, more flexible option, the speech. So isolated freight cars are less and less common, and the surviving traffic are just, block trains of one commodity. I think one of the reasons why trains are not popular to convey freight is the fact that we don't have a proper automatic and strong coupler in Europe. It's always that chain and buffer system, which is kind of crazy. I picked that photo of one of the last freight trains in Paris. It was in 1985. On the aspect of modern railroading, we had Jacques Leplat. He's a Belgian modeler, and during the 1990s, he stated that modern railroading must have an atmosphere. So he was not only conveying the ideas of John Allen in Europe, but also trying to promote it as a form of art, which is something that is quite new in North America, I guess. It's something we live with for a while now. Okay, era 5, TGV and Crisis. More TGVs, less freight. So the high-speed train adventure continues, and the second high-speed line is built from Paris to the west, where I live. New speed record as usual. Okay, and then the tunnel under the channel opens in 1994. It's a revolution because it's the first international high-speed line in Europe. So you can travel between Paris, Belgium, London, and it allows people from the British region of the NMRA to come and visit my work in order to work on my AE. So thank you, Eurostar. Quite cool. At the turn of the century, the National French Railways become a private company, but owned by the French state, which means that each activity becomes different. So you will have passenger traffic for main lines, TGV, freight, infrastructure, and local trains, like the one I picture, always in blue, and so on. For the freight, they are green. And the state of freight is not in bad shape. You can make a comparison. Freight train in France are like passenger trains in North America. Both are scandalous. So given the competition with trucking and very, very bad political decision, the share of the rail on freight traffic is quite inexistent. So we are at less than 10%. It's horrible, but it kind of changes. Okay, era number 5 regarding modeling. Well, the national brand, Jouef, is bought by Hornby, I make it short, and it relocated to China. No trains produced in France. The other part of the crisis is the one that we all face everywhere in the world. Modern railroaders are not getting younger. Everyone is getting older, but new generation like mine are not attracted by trains. On the picture is a group of young model railroaders I co-created in 2004. We stop our activities because, life is like that, but that group remained unique. It was, one of its time. So, year on the 6, here we are. Things are stable, I would say. The French network is 27,000 kilometers long, so quite in good shape, because transport authority have been progressively given to the region. So these are administrative districts, and each of them take care of the local transport. So they buy their own trains, the best ones, because they want to be re-elected. So electrical multiple units like this one are very standard. And that train, I took it when I was going to my previous job. It was a very comfortable way to travel at 160 kilometers per hour with my bike to commute. So if you want to know more about that state of transport, passenger transport in Europe, I really encourage you to check on G4's NMRAx presentations. We will probably share the link on the interchange after that presentation. TGV is the standard for long distance, which is great, but it's also complicated because the network is centralized on Paris. So when you want to go from the west to the south, you need to go through Paris. Kind of crazy. The picture I chose was 3 of the TGVs that were used to set world records, and the last one on the right was for the latest speed record of 574 kilometers per hour. We also have competitors that run the race, so you can find trains from the German company, for instance, running to Paris. Okay, is it good? As far as we have good rules that protect customers, it works quite well. Anyway, so time for model railroading. So as you know, we have, like in any other country, several aspects of model railroading, and we will cover 5 of them in order to see a little bit of everything. So first of all, where do we fit in? We have homes, houses, and they are not the same as in North America or in Australia, for instance. I'd like to, encourage you to watch that great video from Cathy Millat about railway modeling in the UK, because we have a lot of common between the UK and here. Europe has smaller everything. So we have smaller houses, we have smaller cars. So when you want to bring your layout to an exhibition, you need to have a smaller layout. And even when you have room, a spare room, they are smaller. So you will always have a small layout. My layout is considered as a small layout for North America. Here in France, it's considered as medium to big. So our trains are shorter than in North America. A 25 freight car is a long train. So you can put more trains on the same surface, except for the TGVs, that they're very long. And regarding the rail trains, we have more passenger trains and less freight, but I would say it's 50-50 on layouts. We have a good number of exhibitions, but far less than in England. And as an exhibition, you will never have a clinic. Another thing, exhibition layouts are half modular, half individual settings, and all of them are very transport. And we have clubs where you can share knowledge and share your favorite topic of trains, but it's hard to tell if they're active because I'm not aware of any of them around my place. So next, big everything with scale, brands, standards, and association, scales, HO, rails, everything. It's the main scale. And you can find some very impressive results. The one I choose to illustrate is an HO standard and HO metric gauge exhibition layout. Then you have the N scale, which is the smaller one, quite promising. So we have more and more things in N scale. For the rest of scales, well, they are not that used, except maybe 0 and 30 for people who like American trains. And yeah, narrow gauge is quite popular. You can find it for builders and I would say more open-minded people, because narrow gauge is about almost, yeah, everything you can imagine is true. So we have several brands as well. And at the moment, we see a great revival of artisans. So it just individuals who will produce very specific models and details for the French market, mostly using the latest 3D printing and laser cutting options available. So for instance, we have new brands that start offering 0 scale and Z scale offers specific to the French market. Like I said, we have the standards for European modeling. So it's a group of modelers, of associations, actually, the MOROP. It regroups 60 countries and more national associations. So they established the Normen Europäischer Modelbahn, sorry, it's German. So the NEM standards, and you mostly know them for the decoder sockets. So one of the standards set a norm for the couplers. Yes, we managed to do that. So for HO couplers, you can choose the one you like, and you can put it in the socket systems. It's the fork-shaped system you see on the top. And then you have the coupler itself that is standardized. So it's the loop system at the bottom. It's quite common, it's very useful, but it's not prototypical at all. And they're quite ugly. At the national level, regarding association, we have many of them. Actually, I think we have too many of them. So the first one is the Fédération Française de Modélisme Ferroviaire, so FFMF, which stands for French Federation of Model Railroading. Sorry, it's quite old. It was established in 1975. I would say it's the equivalent of the NMRA for France, more or less. And all the associations I listed under the FFMF on the left column are members of the National Federation. On the other hand, you have the Association of Railway Workers, so the UACF. So anyone can join. You don't need to be a railway worker, and you can do a lot of things besides railway modeling. But yeah, all of them offer trainings, clinics, newsletter, whatever you want, you name it. The FFMF has a quarterly publication. I was not able to find the number of members for these associations. It's way lower than the NMRA, even when you compare it to the number of active people in the country. And the impact of this association, I would say it varies depending on who you ask. Members will say it's super cool, and non-member will say, meh, it's not useful. And you also have a lot of clubs. The distribution of clubs is not equal in the territory, so I don't have any club nearby where I live. And I know some cities where you can find, it's small cities where you can find 2 clubs. So yeah, I don't know why. We have a lot of forums online, of course. The web was a very good opportunity to put people together. However, you need, like for a club, to find a place that suits what you like, and yeah, and people you'll discuss with. For instance, we have 2 forums regarding North American trains, because at some of them, people can just, yeah, they don't like the others. It's kind of crazy. So, what do people model? The answer is quite obvious. French trains, yes. People like to see what they see through their windows. So most layouts will be French themed, like that one in the HO. And despite the fact that at the moment we have a lot of EMUs, not a lot of freight, the vast majority of layouts being put forward in the press on exhibitions are trains from the 1950s to the 1980s. Even modern layouts will show a lot of freight, even if at the moment it's only 10% of the traffic. Operations, they're another thing. We are only a few modelers, often the youngest ones, that try to promote it. It will be trendy in the future. I'm sure we need to convince others that it's their wonderful idea. You know how change is made. And speaking of younger modelers, I'm still considered as a young modeler, despite being almost 40 years old. So the community gets older, but we have a few motivated young modelers that exist, and we try to do our best to welcome more people in the hobby. And we also have a lot of diversity we need to address. It's a white guy's hobby. You can find a few women, but not much. And we also have a lot of collectors. They just buy very, very detailed models, and I think most models are built for them these days. So yeah, it makes models being more and more expensive. It's a problem, but yeah, it's how the world goes, and we will try to find more active modelers actually. Narrow gauge is a good success when you look for the atmosphere and when you want to have a micro layout and some exotic topics. So I chose that very interesting Eastern communist German-based layout because apparently the layout was themed for Germany just because of a joke. North American lines, well, not much. People don't model much besides French topics. I personally model a Western Canadian short line. I'm using cards and waybills, and I'm an alien in my own country. I choose that nice layout that represents an African river with a barge. That's the kind of not French layout you can find. But most layouts you find depicting other countries, they are showing that because it's a club invited coming from another country. So as people prefer to see trains from their country, foreign layouts are not often shown in magazines. Okay, let's have a short tour of a few layouts before I conclude. You will always find the same type of layouts. You will have the whole layouts, you cannot move layouts that you can bring to exhibitions and modules. Most layouts since the turn of the century are presented like this. So they are shadow case, presented like this industrial, suburbs of Paris themed layout. In France, we use the term showcase because, well, it's a case that shows things. Yeah, I know it's an English term, but it's used. Very often you will have a staging attached to the layout. Here it's an exhibition layout, and as you can see, the majority of the layout is the staging itself. But as we don't have proper operations, it's just a matter of putting stuff you don't want to see on your layout apart. At exhibition, sometimes the staging can take a lot of space. Scratch building is something you can find. It's not the most popular activity. On this zero layout, the modeler represents the 20th century, the beginning of the 20th century, and everything was scratch built. It's quite cool. What modelers do is actually build a layout, and they just buy rolling stock, put it on the layout. Sometimes they don't weather their trains, which I find very shocking. So time flies, and try to move on. So yeah, another example. historical aspect, some people will just take, make some research in order to depict some existing scenes. And you also have, well, the goal of having fun. Yes, that's the basics. You just build something, put it together, and you have a very kind of result. Very quickly, regarding on the media side, you will mostly find things on YouTube, private personal channels, and a few specialized websites. But the most of the activity will be conducted by the press. The big group is LR Press, so it's the equivalent of Kalmbach in North America. They edit a lot of magazines and books, and I have to, full disclosure, I sometimes write articles for them. So the main one, the most read magazine, is Locomotive on the left. It was founded in 1937. It's a very generic, mostly publication, monthly publication, and it will cost you 9.5 euros for almost 100 pages if you buy it at the press stand. On the right is the magazine Ferrovision about rail train prototypes, but it's half trains of these days, and a lot of things. The other half is about all the trains. So it's 10 euros for 84 pages, and you will have one every 2 months. My favorite ones are two other magazines from LR Press, and the first one is Voix Libre. So it started in 1990 in as a section in Locomotive, and is independent since 1997. So it's only about narrow gauge and scratch building, and it's a French magazine you can buy in English, in French, but also in English. So it's a quarterly publication, and it costs approximately 10 euros for 84 pages. And the last one on the right, I really care about it. It's Clé pour le train miniature. It gathers tips and tricks for beginners. It's a magazine just for beginners. There are 100 projects per year. Everything inside are very simple tutorials, and it's super attractive. It's only 40 pages, okay, and you have it every 2 months, but it's only 4.5 euros. It's very attractive. I think something like that in every possible country. Regarding the competitors, on the right is F, so they hired a new editor recently, and they provide notice to their high standard. So it's published every month, and the stock price is 10.9 euros, and you have more than 100 pages approximately. And on the right is Le Train. It's something. The magazine is located in very east of France, close to the border with Germany, and 1/3 of the are usually about that region of Germany. So Carlo has qualitative as competitors. At credit, they have a lot of special issues regarding prototype trains, so with a lot of pictures. So that can be quite interesting sometimes. Whew. Okay, it's over. Wow. Thank you very much for supporting my English, and I put the last slide in French, but I guess you can understand it as well. So now it's time for questions.
Not a problem. Oh, thank you very much for that. I must apologize to the people out there with the audio. Did get a bit choppy at a few spots, but for the majority, it was working well. So very, very interesting. Some lovely photos of some modeling there. It's good to see that this hobby is worldwide. It's the quality is everywhere you look. Okay, let's have a little look at the questions that we've got here. There's not much coming on the chat as yet. So in France, how big is the NMRA? many other NMRA members are in your area?
I search on the members directory, and we are two.
Two. Okay. Sounds like
Yes.
an area we've got to build. So.
Yes, absolutely. And I hope to, well, not only build something for France, but at the European level, because we are not many there.
Right. And how many US modelers do you know in your area? Or is US modeling prolific, or is it mainly French outline? Because I know here in Australia, I model an Australian prototype, but there are a lot of American modelers here as well. Is that the same in France?
Yeah, well, most people will model French trains. So I think I know like 40 people modeling US trains and North American trains overall in France. I think for 1/3 of them, they only do that. They only care about American prototypes, and the other 2/3 will have projects with American trains, but they will also model French trains or English trains or narrow gauge or something else.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of narrow gauge in everybody. I model ON30. We have a narrow gauge line down here called Puffing Billy, which is Baldwin NA class loco. Which, yeah. So, oh, cool. Now, one of the questions that had come in was on about modelling supplies. Do you have a plethora of local hobby shops, or is a lot of the stuff that you have to purchase done through the online environment?
Well, I briefly checked on the most recent magazines before starting that presentation, and the number of local hobby shops is getting, well, it's decreasing. So we have less and less of them, and the surviving ones are mostly the ones that managed to start selling online a long time ago. So we mostly rely on online supplies, but local hobby shop, if it exists, can be an opportunity to meet other modelers. So
Yeah,
it's not something you get when you buy online.
no, because it was funny you were saying that clubs don't seem to be a big thing in France either. Over here in Australia, I'd say in Brisbane, where I live, in one of the capital cities, we'd probably have, I'd say, at least 5 model railway clubs spread around the greater southeast area here in Queensland. And some of them have got quite large memberships and large facilities as well, where they've got layouts built. There's one where Brad and I actually went to their train show last week, and they've got a very large club room there with a big N scale layout and I think a triple decker HO scale layout, which takes up quite a bit of room, plus a big outdoor garden railway. So, but yes, you were saying clubs don't seem to be a big thing there. Is there a local club near you?
No, I'm very alone. I have a museum, a model museum
Yes.
nearby, but it's not really what I fancy, so I'm not actively going there. I used to be a member of a club when I was younger, but that club is not existing anymore.
Yes. Well, I think the logistics of putting a club together, when you look at what we can do in the online environment these days now, I think a lot of the clubs are shrinking, and a lot of their members are going online and just forming little groups and the likes that meet and chat online. I know here in Australia with the tyranny of distance, that's used quite a bit. But yes, well, very, very interesting, and some brilliant modelling there, and we'll have to have another visit, and maybe you can give us a tour of your layout, and we'll do a layout tour, or something similar.
Okay, yeah, why not? I'm very active on the NMRA interchange, so you can find me there, and
Cool.
you can suggest any kind of following presentation regarding the different aspects I covered tonight. Well,
Yes.
today, this morning, this evening, whenever it is.
Well, we've got a hangout room, which we'll give you the link to if you want to go over there. There'll probably be a few people milling around there. It may have some questions and the likes for you. If not, yeah, we'll have to catch up with you on the exchange. We'll have to start maybe a earlier time where it's a bit more friendlier to our European and British people. But anyway, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Marty, and well, goodbye, everyone. Thank you for attending.